Well, the game is the same, but many of the players have changed. The U.S. Congress and President Barack Obama are facing off in another supreme spending shutdown. If they do not agree on a government funding bill by the end of Monday, Washington time, much of the U.S. government will shut down. And it's a little past 5 a.m. on Monday, September 30th in Washington, so they are running out of time.
We last saw this happen back in 2011 when Congress narrowly avoided a shutdown by passing a spending measure shortly after the midnight deadline hit. Of course, the things that happen in the world's largest economy have a great impact on the rest of the world, including Korea. To take a closer look at the first possible U.S. government shutdown in 17 years, we're now joined live in the studio by Dr. In-chul, Professor of International Economics at Sungkyunkwan University in Korea. Professor Kim, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Professor Kim, before we get any further into our discussion, let's first do a recap of the events leading up to where we are now, or where U.S. is on the verge of a U.S. government shutdown. How did the U.S. get here? I mean, so close to the deadline and so close to a shutdown. And what will a shutdown actually mean?
Well, by the U.S. law, excuse me, by the U.S. law, the U.S. Congress has have to pass the budget bill by the end of September 30, for next year's budget, and now, the deadline is almost, there, and when they said the U.S. would have the shutdown of the government, doesn't mean to shut down completely its operations. Still, the doors of the other, government agencies may be, open, like people in the security-sensitive areas, active military personnel and air traffic controllers, and, border security, guards. Still, they have to be on duty, and other, important, essential, activities still will be going on. But non-essential activities like issuance of a new passport will be closed, and also, federal parks and museums be, closed, and this would, affect the U.S. economy a lot. It will damage the economy to a large extent, because the U.S. economy has been recovering to some extent, but that's going to have some, impact on the U.S. recovery.
Right, and that would be about, by estimates, about 800,000 of the 2.1 million strong hold federal workforce in the U.S. if there were to be a shutdown.
Right, yeah.
Now, over the weekend, on early Sunday morning, local time to be exact, House Republicans approved a spending plan that would delay Obamacare for a year and repeal its tax on medical devices. The plan has been tossed to the Senate. So what are the implications, Professor?
Well, the working of the U.S. Congress is very complicated. It's not easy to understand, how they're doing. But you see that there are two chambers of the Congress. One is the Senate, and the other the House of Representatives. And the House is controlled by the Republicans, whereas the Senate controlled by the Democrats. And the Republicans oppose the Obamacare, whereas the Democrats and the President Obama, desperately want to see their Obamacare be implemented, and as they been fighting against each other up until this time, it's very likely that the shutdown is going to be realized, because I don't see any room for compromise at the last minute between the two chambers. So it is going to be somewhat, perhaps last minute dramatic compromise would be possible, because the two Senate and the House of Representatives do not like on the surface, the U.S. shutdown of the government, but still, they have some experiences, previously. So there will be shutdown of the government for some time, soon, from perhaps next week or so.
Right, because back in 2011, we saw the same thing happen, and just a minute or two after the deadline, they came to a compromise and agreed on a budget plan, which all in all, however, sent sovereign ratings down for the United States for the first time by Standard & Poor's. So, of course, they do not want to see that. But if a budget passes within the next 19 hours or so, is the U.S. in the clear?
Not quite, because they're going to have another problem coming up soon in about 2 weeks, because they face the debt limit problem, because the Treasury people have been doing making a lot of efforts to avoid the debt limit problem, but they said the Treasury Secretary has indicated that the extraordinary measures been exhausted now, so they need to really get the approval from the Congress again for extending the debt limit borrowing capacities. So that's going to be a more serious problem than this government shutdown. So that's another problem they have to struggle with.
Right, and I think one point that we should note is the fact that unlike many other developed economies, for the U.S., it's the legislative branch and not the executive branch, which is President Barack Obama, who gets to decide how much the government can borrow. So there definitely needs to be a compromise between the two parties in order for them to raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, because the people worldwide are concerned about welfare programs because there's some inefficiencies involved, and it is a good system for the Congress and the administration to negotiate and compromise on somewhat the budget spending or the debt limit. But for the U.S., it seems to me that it's been a political game between the Republicans and Democrats, and that way the U.S. economy is going to be damaged. But not only that, the global economy, is going to be affected a lot by what they're doing, because the U.S. economy, as you know, is pulling the world economy as a locomotive. So if the economy doesn't do well in the U.S., that's going to have a negative impacts on the developing countries, especially the newly emerging countries, as well as the Korean economy.
Right. Well, meeting halfway is important. They are not going to get anywhere by agreeing to disagree, that's for sure. So what kind of compromises could the two parties reach to avoid a government shutdown?
Well, we understand that both the parties do not like the government shutdown, but I hope that they're going to come up with some compromise on the one hand. On the other hand, they need to consider not only this is their internal political issues and problems, but also it is affecting the global economy as well. So I want they come up with the better solutions considering the other economies in the world.
Right, like you mentioned, there is no doubt that there will be consequences and ramifications for the global economy, including Korea, should the U.S. government come to a shutdown. What are some possible scenarios that we can face? And in your view, what do you think economic policymakers here in Korea should do to better prepare the Korean economy from as an insulation from this potential threat?
All right. If the U.S. is going to have a shutdown of the government, and U.S. also is going to have a problem with extending the debt limit, then the U.S. is going to default on its debt, and that's going to cause the downgrade to the creditworthiness of the U.S. bonds or the U.S. Economy, and it's going to damage the U.S. economic recovery. And that's going to have a tremendous adverse impacts on the global economy, as well as on, as I said, and on the Korean economy in terms of the change of the volatility in the exchange rates and volatility in the capital flows. So for Korea, it's going to be susceptible to changes in the exchange rates, especially when the currency becomes stronger. That's going to discourage the Korean exporters. So we need to monitor and closely watch what's going on in the U.S. politics and then policies. And fortunately, at this point, Korea is running trade surplus for to some extent. So we are just in a better position than compared to other developing or newly emerging countries and so forth. So again, we need to be closely watching the capital flows and the changes in the exchange rates.
All right, well, we'll certainly find that out in a matter of hours. And, but as of now, it seems like both houses of the U.S. Congress are taking the words of Shakespeare to heart. Onto the breach once more, the U.S. government goes. So thank you, Dr. Kim, for today.
My pleasure.